Immediately, 2 or 3 weeks later, he says, you know what, Debbie? No, she's pregnant. Denise Huxtable is not pregnant. Lisa Bonet is pregnant.
The show you know as A Different World almost never made it past the first season. It was a disaster waiting to happen. On the surface, it looked like a polished hit, one of the most watched shows on TV. But behind the curtain, chaos. The cast was clashing with producers. The main star was on the chopping block, and cancellation was hanging over the project like a storm cloud. The glossy image fans saw every week was hiding a mess that could have destroyed everything. The scandalous hidden history of a doomed show.
Denise, why is it that we seem to keep bumping into each other?
Because I'm always late and you're always in the way.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Destiny.
To see how it all went wrong, you've got to rewind to the beginning. The Cosby Show was dominating TV like nothing else, breaking records, rewriting the rules, and pulling in massive numbers every week. Naturally, the network wanted to cash in on that magic. Their solution? A spin-off. The pitch was simple. Follow Denise Huxtable, the second oldest daughter, as she left home and headed off to college. Easy money, right? But here's the wild twist. That was never the original idea. In fact, the first concept for A Different World had nothing to do with Denise Huxtable. The plan was to create a show about a white student attending a historically black college. Yeah, you heard that right. They even had their eyes on future Hollywood star Meg Ryan for the lead role. Imagine how different things could have been. Eventually, the idea got watered down into a compromise. Keep Denise as the lead, but throw in a white roommate to recreate that dynamic. That role went to a fresh-faced Marissa Tomei, who would later shock Hollywood by winning an Oscar. Even with star power from The Cosby Show attached, the set was a circus. The first pilot episode, total disaster. The producers hated it so much they trashed the whole thing. Not just one episode, 4 entire episodes were scrapped before the show even hit the airwaves. A new producer had to be flown in, scrambling with just 6 weeks to build a brand new pilot from scratch. It wasn't TV magic. It was a desperate rescue mission. Finally, in 1987, the show premiered. Thanks to its time slot sandwiched between The Cosby Show and Cheers, 2 of the biggest juggernauts on television, the ratings shot through the roof. Millions tuned in instantly, but while the audience was hooked, the critics were sharpening their knives. The reviews came in swinging, and they were savage. Critics tore A Different World apart, calling it boring, childish, and flat out not funny. Some even mocked it as nothing more than a lazy knockoff of The Cosby Show. The first season was such a creative disaster that it holds a humiliating 11% rating on Rotten Tomatoes today. One journalist even wrote that A Different World got one of the biggest waves of bad reviews ever for a hit show. Brutal. The problem? It felt fake. The series was supposed to take place at Hillman College, a historically black college in Virginia, but the show didn't even bother to show what life at an HBCU was really like. Students barely cracked open a book, skipped class like it was optional, and spent most of their time in sitcom fluff instead of anything that resembled reality. Sure, the ratings were hot, but creatively, the show was an empty shell, and the backlash was only the beginning because the real storm was brewing, and it all centered on the show's biggest star.
Friends from The Cosby Show still?
I haven't really seen anyone in a long time.
Lisa Bonet wasn't just the face of the series. She was the reason it existed in the first place. She was young, stylish, magnetic, everything TV gold demanded. But in the summer of 1988, after the rocky first season wrapped, Lisa dropped a bombshell with her husband, rising rock star Lenny Kravitz. They announced they were expecting a baby, and Hollywood gasped. Now here's where it gets juicy. The network had just hired Debbie Allen, a powerhouse director and choreographer, to rescue A Different World. She wanted grit, realism, and stories that actually mattered. And to her, Lisa's pregnancy was perfect material. She envisioned a bold storyline about a young pregnant student navigating life at Hillman, a storyline that could have been groundbreaking on television. But standing in the way was one very powerful man, Bill Cosby. And Cosby wasn't having it. He shut down the idea instantly. His verdict? Lisa Bonet could be pregnant in real life, but Denise Huxtable, his carefully crafted good girl from a respectable family, could never be shown as a single unwed mother. For 4 seasons, Cosby had protected the Huxtable brand like it was sacred, and he wasn't about to let a storyline tarnish it. That decision sparked an all-out war behind the scenes. Debbie Allen pushed for honesty and realness. Cosby demanded control and family-friendly perfection. And caught in the crossfire was Lisa Bonet, who had no choice but to play by someone else's rules. In the end, Cosby's word was law. Denise Huxtable wasn't written as pregnant. Instead, Lisa Bonet was forced out of the show completely. The official story was that Denise dropped out of Hillman and went back home to her family on The Cosby Show. But behind the scenes, it was pure power politics, and Lisa lost the battle. What fans never saw was just how toxic things really got on set. Years later, Jasmine Guy, the actress who brought the Southern Belle Whitley Gilbert to life, dropped a bombshell about how Lisa Bonet was treated. According to Jasmine, producers didn't just criticize Lisa, they humiliated her in front of the live studio audience. They would get right in her face, point fingers, and bark at her to just say your lines. Can you imagine? The so-called star of the show reduced to being treated like she was disposable. The tension was so unbearable that Jasmine Guy herself hit a breaking point. In a bold act of loyalty, she decided she couldn't stand by and watch her co-star be torn down. Jasmine marched into the producer's office and handed in her 2-week notice. She told them flat out she didn't like how they were treating the cast. And when producers asked if it had happened to her directly, Jasmine refused to back down. She told them, if it happens to her, it happens to me. You're disrespecting the cast. You're disrespecting Sinbad. I felt like it was happening to me. That was a rare move in Hollywood, publicly standing up against the people running the show. But the damage was already done. The star was gone, the set was poisoned, and the series was teetering on the edge of collapse. Then came a twist no one saw coming. The arrival of a powerhouse who would completely flip the script. The Debbie Allen Revolution.
And looking at your resume, you've been the maestro of many a TV show. And that leads me to the next part about our interview that changed my life.
Debbie Allen stepped in as producer and director, handed what most people thought was an impossible assignment, rescue a sinking show that had lost its identity. But Debbie wasn't just another Hollywood hire. She had a secret advantage. She wasn't guessing at what HBCU life looked like. She lived it. Debbie was a proud graduate of Howard University, one of the most respected HBCUs in the country. She knew the culture, the rhythm, the details of college life, and she was determined to inject that authenticity onto the screen. Her first move, a total makeover. Debbie redesigned the pit, the student hangout, making it look less like a cheesy TV set and more like a real campus spot, complete with a visible kitchen staff. She scrapped the corny, cartoonish cheerleader costumes from season 1 and replaced them with fashion that actually reflected Black college style. And she didn't just change the look, she changed the energy. Debbie enforced discipline like a drill sergeant, instituting mandatory morning workouts where the cast had to do sit-ups and stretches before shooting. Debbie wasn't just running a set, she was building a movement. With Lisa Bonet out of the picture, Debbie Allen knew the show had to be reinvented or it wouldn't survive. She flipped the formula completely. No more single star carrying the weight. Instead, she built a different world around the whole crew of students, turning it into a true ensemble. At the heart of it all, she pushed 2 breakout characters into the spotlight. Whitley Gilbert, the spoiled, sharp-tongued Southern Belle, and Dwayne Wayne, the nerdy math genius with the iconic flip-up glasses. That bold move created one of the most unforgettable love stories in TV history. But Debbie wasn't just chasing romance, she was chasing authenticity, and she went further than anyone expected. Every year, she packed up the entire writing staff and flew them to Atlanta for field trips to real HBCUs like Spelman and Morehouse. They walked the campuses, studied the latest dorm setups, checked out the fashion trends, and most importantly, sat down with real students and faculty. These conversations weren't just casual. They inspired storylines that shook television. Some of the show's most powerful episodes came straight from what students confided during those visits. Debbie also gave her actors a voice, something almost unheard of in Hollywood at the time. She treated them like collaborators, asking each cast member to write down 10 storylines they personally wanted their characters to explore. Those lists went directly into the writer's room, and several of those ideas actually made it into the show. Suddenly, the actors weren't just reading lines, they were shaping history. And Debbie didn't shy away from danger. Unlike The Cosby Show, which kept its image squeaky clean, A Different World went full throttle into the heavy stuff. Under her leadership, Hillman College students tackled apartheid in South Africa, the trauma of date rape, the reality of domestic violence, and the devastating rise of HIV/AIDS. This wasn't just comedy anymore. It was social commentary, and it was electric. But while the stories on screen were groundbreaking, the drama off screen was just as juicy.
She said, "Thank you for being my friend."
Thank you for being my friend.
Because we were really tight. We were going together.
Behind the cameras, the cast wasn't just acting out love stories, they were living them. Whispers of secret romances, real-life crushes, and hidden relationships swirled through the set. The sizzling chemistry between Dwayne and Whitley might have kept fans glued to the screen, but insiders say that fire was stoked by a tangled web of real attraction and private entanglements when the camera stopped rolling. The biggest secret of all? It wasn't Dwayne and Whitley's TV romance, it was the real-life love story playing out behind the cameras. While fans were glued to the will they won't they drama on screen, the true passion was happening between Kadeem Hardison, who played Dwayne Wayne, and Cree Summer, the free-spirited activist Freddie Brooks. At the height of A Different World's popularity, these two were locked in a serious 3-year romance from 1989 to 1992, and hardly anyone knew it. Their love story wasn't some Hollywood fling. It grew from friendship. They bonded over motorcycles and comic books, two rebels with their own rhythm. Then came the turning point. One day, while out riding, Cree pulled her bike over and dropped the bomb. She told him, "I love you. I think I'm in love with you." Kadeem was stunned, but the more he thought about it, the more it made sense. She wasn't just his friend, she was his soulmate. Later, Cree called him the blueprint for a first love, praising him as kind, generous, and funny as hell. Their breakup before the show ended was tough, especially since they still had to see each other daily on set, but somehow they held on to their friendship. And if you look closely during the opening credits of season 5, you can spot them sneaking in a quick kiss in the background, hidden in plain sight. But the romance drama didn't stop there. The web was even more tangled. Before Cree, Kadeem had his eyes on another co-star, Jasmine Guy. The two first crossed paths while filming Spike Lee's School Days. Kadeem was only 20 at the time, Jasmine was 24, and while he was head over heels, she thought he was just too young. But that didn't stop him. At a cast party, he even begged the DJ to replay a slow jam just so he could keep dancing with her. That's how deep his crush ran. And that wasn't the only love connection born from A Different World. Darrell M. Bell, who played Dwayne's loyal best friend Ron Johnson, fell hard for none other than Tempest Bledsoe, Vanessa Huxtable from The Cosby Show. They first met in 1989 when Tempest guest starred on A Different World. A few years later, sparks flew, and they started dating. Unlike most Hollywood couples, their love endured. Today, they've been together for nearly 3 decades. No marriage certificate, no Hollywood scandal, just quiet, lasting commitment. But while romance was blossoming off screen, on set, the drama was about to explode. Because when the writers came up with the idea for what would become the most iconic moment in the entire series, the two main stars, the very heart of the show, secretly hated it. They were convinced it would flop and ruin everything. What they didn't realize, that moment was about to define the legacy of A Different World. Every fan remembers the legendary moment, Dwayne Wayne crashing Whitley Gilbert's wedding and stopping her at the altar with a desperate plea. It's one of the most iconic scenes in TV history, burned into pop culture forever. But here's the twist. Behind the scenes, both Kadeem Hardison and Jasmine Guy hated it. Jasmine said when she first read the script, she thought it was whack and corny. Kadeem didn't disagree. He felt the whole setup made Dwayne look like a snake, stealing his friend's fiancée in the most dramatic way possible. To him, it didn't match the integrity of his character at all. Kadeem even begged the writers to scrap it. His pitch? A quieter, more honest confession. Dwayne showing up the night before the wedding to bare his soul and let Whitley choose. The writers listened, but they weren't budging. They wanted a church showdown, big, loud, and unforgettable. On the day of filming, the tension was through the roof. Kadeem was so nervous, so conflicted, that when he sprinted down the aisle, his mind went completely blank. He forgot his lines on the spot. What came out instead wasn't scripted at all. It was pure, raw emotion. He just blurted out from the heart, "Baby, please, please." Jasmine, standing there in her wedding gown, could barely hear him, but instinct kicked in. She reacted naturally, and the magic happened. That unscripted, shaky plea became the scene that defined a different world. What the actors thought would be a total disaster turned into television history, all because of a mistake. But that wasn't the only war being fought. While the cast battled over scripts, Debbie Allen was battling forces way bigger than Hollywood egos, corporate America itself. In 1991, she was determined to make an episode about the HIV/AIDS crisis, a subject almost no sitcom dared to touch. But as soon as sponsors caught wind of it, panic set in. Major advertisers threatened to pull out, terrified of their brands being linked to such a controversial topic. Suddenly, the entire episode was hanging by a thread. The episode, titled "If I Should Die Before I Wake," was in real danger of being killed before cameras even rolled. That's when Debbie Allen made a bold move. She picked up the phone and called in backup. Her ace, none other than Whoopi Goldberg, one of the biggest stars in the world at the time. Without a second thought, Whoopi said yes. Her decision to guest star gave the network the confidence to stare down the advertisers and push forward. And just like that, A Different World didn't just make TV, it made history. When the episode finally aired, it wasn't just powerful, it was historic. The HIV/AIDS storyline became the highest rated episode in A Different World's entire run. Debbie Allen later said, Whoopi Goldberg's fearless choice to step in helped save millions of lives because it educated viewers at a time when fear, stigma, and lies about the disease were everywhere.
Because y'all's love story is cute. I thought...
Who's this fool? He's too young. That moment cemented the show's legacy, not just as entertainment, but as a cultural force. But what happened to the cast after Hillman? Their journeys were filled with stunning highs, painful setbacks, and hidden battles most fans never knew about. Take Sinbad, the big-hearted comedian who played Walter Oakes, the lovable gym teacher and dorm director. After leaving the show in season 4, he skyrocketed into fame, packing out comedy shows and starring in hit movies like House Guest and Jingle All the Way. But in 2020, his world turned upside down. At 64, Sinbad suffered a massive ischemic stroke that left the entire left side of his body paralyzed. For 2 years, his family kept the devastating news private while he fought through brutal therapy. Today, he's slowly relearning how to walk. In a message to fans, he vowed he won't stop until he can walk across the stage again. Meanwhile, Darrell Bell, the smooth-talking Ron Johnson, faced a completely different kind of fight. His father, Travers Bell Jr., was a trailblazer, the first black man to own a firm on the New York Stock Exchange. But when his father suddenly passed in 1988, 24-year-old Darrell was thrust into the spotlight, named executor of a $14 million estate. Instead of celebrating his success on TV, he found himself dragged into a vicious, very public family war. His stepmother and aunt accused him of mismanaging the family fortune and took him to court. The case was eventually thrown out, but for a young actor balancing Hollywood with a courtroom battle, it was a nightmare he never saw coming. Then there's Dawn Lewis, the powerhouse who played the driven Jaleesa Vincent. She wasn't just an actress. She co-wrote the show's iconic theme song alongside Bill Cosby and Stu Gardner. But when it came time to record it, producers shut her out. Why? They thought letting her sing it would make her too visible since she wasn't the lead star. Imagine writing the song and being told you weren't allowed to sing it. After 5 seasons, she left A Different World for a lead role in Hanging with Mr. Cooper. But the glory didn't last. After just 1 season, producers changed the direction of the show and cut her character. Years later, Dawn spoke openly about the invisible ceiling black actresses face in Hollywood, doors opening just enough to tease success before slamming shut. And while some of her castmates struggled in front of the camera, Cree Summer, who played the free-spirited Freddie Brooks, quietly built an entire empire with her voice. After A Different World wrapped, Cree Summer pulled off one of the slickest Hollywood pivots ever. She became a powerhouse voice actor. You may not have seen her face everywhere, but you've definitely heard her voice. Cree has brought to life more than 100 characters in some of the most beloved cartoons of all time. Susie Carmichael in Rugrats, Elmira Duff in Tiny Toon Adventures, and the wild Foxy Love in Drawn Together. Quietly, she built a career most actors can only dream about. Her co-stars kept grinding too. Jasmine Guy turned her sharp wit and charisma into a long career with major roles in hit series like The Vampire Diaries and Amazon's Harlem, while also carving out respect as a director and activist. Kadeem Hardison, he never stopped working. From starring alongside Zendaya in Disney's Casey Undercover to roles in critically acclaimed shows like Black Monday and The Chi, he proved he was more than just Dwayne Wayne. He was built for longevity. Looking back, the journey of A Different World is nothing short of legendary. What began as a bland, poorly reviewed spin-off on the verge of collapse exploded into one of the most powerful comeback stories in television. Through chaos, clashes, and the fearless leadership of Debbie Allen, it evolved into a cultural landmark that still resonates today. The show didn't just entertain, it sparked real change. It inspired an entire generation of young Black students, sparking a surge of enrollment at real-life HBCUs. That's impact you can measure in numbers and lives. Even decades later, the story hasn't faded. New generations keep discovering the show, realizing the issues it tackled. Racism, sexism, violence, and inequality are still just as real. The cast themselves recently reunited for a sold-out HBCU tour, bringing the magic of Hillman College back to the people and proving the legacy is stronger than ever. Here's the real secret of A Different World. The polished, perfect sitcom audiences adored was actually born out of chaos, fights, and raw defiance behind the scenes. And that struggle, that pain and persistence is what gave it an unshakable heart. Without the mess, there would have been no masterpiece. That's it for today's story. Don't forget to like, subscribe, share, and drop a comment below. See you on the next one.